All right, Suresh, thank you so much for taking some time to speak with me. And this is for everybody in the community. We really value your input and your insights and your experiences. I'm going to get right to our first question here, and that is, what initially inspired you to pursue a career in operations management?
Okay, this will be a long answer. Okay, it's basically a process of trial and error. So I started in my little village. I was in a high school that did not do science. So in grade 9, I moved to another high school that does science. So there I do physics, chemistry, and mathematics. And then after 10th grade, I had to go to another town because the school stopped at 10, and the bridge was made by some of the universities. And that was one of the most fortunate things that happened in my life, is that in 11th grade, I was at a university. It's called pre-university, but it was taught by professors who have all PhDs. And the other thing was that everybody there was above me, instead of going to a high school where you're in grade 12 or 11 and everybody's below you, you know what I mean? In some sense. So it's a great environment. And there I was very good in physics. In fact, there was a college-wide math competition. And I decided to enroll into it. And one of the professors, after I got the consolation prize, he said I would have won the contest if I hadn't answered the one question, because there was negative mark for wrong answers. And I answered a question in trigonometry, and I hadn't learned trigonometry yet. How stupid. But in any case, I got consolation prize. And this is the professor who said, a lot of exciting things are happening in the physics, unified field theory. I should really go into physics. So I told him, my brother thinks there are no jobs in physics, so I better do engineering. So I became a mechanical engineering student at IIT Bombay. There's a lot of history about how I got there, but let's not worry about that right now. And I did mechanical engineering. It was kind of one of the top schools in India. And then at the end of mechanical engineering, I decided I don't want to work with machines. It's just not me. Although I did take a course in industrial engineering there. So I enrolled into a program for MBA at Washington State University in Pullman, Washington, in the West Coast. And there, it was an easy school for me, so I learned a lot about other things other than doing MBA. And at the end of MBA, I did MBA. My major was production management. That's appropriate because I had done industrial engineering as one of the major. And then I got a job offer from Weyerhaeuser Company. They paid me, the salary was $17,500. That was in 1969. It was a pretty good salary. But I also got an admission from Carnegie Mellon in the PhD program. And so I was staying with a host father of mine, the guy named Richard Vedder, who was a 1948 Harvard MBA. And somehow he sort of said, yeah, between the two, I said, why not do the job first and then go into PhD? He said, once you get a job, your standard will go up, you might have a family, and it might be very difficult to go back to the PhD. So somehow or the other, I decided I go to Carnegie Mellon. More and more I think about it, it's just the Vetter wanted always to do a PhD, but he had a family after he finished an MBA at Harvard and had no choice but to go into business. And he always also tried to teach a course in local colleges. So I had things that he kind of thinking, let me do a PhD for him in some way.
Got it.
So I went to Carnegie Mellon, and there, what happened was I enrolled into what is called the Industrial Administration Program. This is used to be called GSIA, which is now Tepper School. Okay. So they were giving me operations management courses, and I said, I already done them as an MBA. Don't want to repeat them. So I took OR courses. And at the end of 1 year, when there was a qualifying exam, they said, you can take IA or OR qualified. I said, well, the OR courses are now, the IA courses were before. So let me take an OR qualified. And I actually got a PhD in operations research from Carnegie Mellon. And that's how I got operations research. And then when so there was an OR career in some sense. I finished my PhD in 5 semesters. So by the end of December 1971, I decided that I will go to do a postdoc under George Dantzig at Stanford. And it was, so I asked our PhD program coordinator named Marty Geisel, who actually later became the dean at Vanderbilt. But he told me, well, if I finish my thesis, he should not continue my fellowship. I said, okay, in that case, you will not see my thesis, I will sit on it. And he said, you got me. I will continue your fellowship. And I went to Stanford for working under George Dantzig. And George Dantzig gave me another $100 saying California is more expensive. So I had a pretty good amount of money and did my postdoc at George Dantzig's place. And then comes the following thing. You know, in those days, we were not like people who are applying to business schools and doing all sorts of practice with job talk and everything. We were kind of naive in that respect in some way. So I hadn't applied to any school while I was at Stanford. And I got 3 letters. 3 letters come from Chicago, Harvard, and MIT. I believe those letters came to me because they went to Carnegie Mellon and asked them who is one of the best graduate students or whatever, so they gave my name. And I was going to go to India. So from San Francisco, I booked a trip to India and a stopovers in Chicago and Boston. I interviewed Chicago, and I interviewed MIT, and then Harvard. Just a little bit of a thing about these things. Paul Kleindorfer was a professor at MIT, and he was also a student of Jerry Thompson, who I did my PhD under at Carnegie Mellon. So he told me basically that by the time I came for interview, everybody had made up their mind. I was going to be too late. And so I basically did not get any offer from MIT. Chicago never talked to me after that. I don't know why. And Harvard said they haven't completed their interview. I called John Pratt because I thought there was some good news from Harvard. After all, the people who took me to dinner were none other than Howard Reifa and Robert Schleifer. Those are the famous Reifa-Schleifer guys. And so I thought maybe, but in the meantime, I got a visiting professorship from Rice University in Houston and another offer from an Indian International Institute of Management in Berlin. And I talked to George. George says, well, Harvard is not there yet, and you need a job. And between an institute and university, you should go to a university. And he told me that he had a difficult time moving from Rand Corporation to Berkeley. I said, if he had a difficult time, think about me. So I basically took Rice University in Houston. And that was my first job in 1972. And then from there, you know, I was not, a year later, I got a job at University of Toronto. And the reason I moved to Canada would be that I would be drafted. I had, so I wasn't going to get drafted. So I moved to Canada and I became a professor there. It was very nice for me. I got my, I moved there in 1973 and 74, they promoted me to associate. So that was like 3 years after my PhD in some way. And there are some stories going with that as well. I was giving a promotion to associate, and one of the professor told me later that he tabled the motion and he said, the guy has 10 papers. Why don't we give him associate with tenure? And so they gave me associate with tenure right after 1 year after I went to school. And in 1978, they made me a full professor. So that was like, I was already 32 and I was a full professor at School of Management Studies in University of Toronto. which is now the Rotman School of Business. And there, I taught some OR courses. Eventually, I did some OM courses. And finally, in 1997, I moved to Texas. And that's where I basically became a full-fledged OM professor. So if you want to see how I became an OM professor, this is the route I took.
That's
and
wonderful.
then not only I became OM professor, I had experience of building an OM PhD program at Rotman School. And so that allowed me to build another PhD program at University of Texas, because I went there was no OM program. And then I started growing the school, because that was actually one of my mandates. And the dean said, you've done a lot of papers, why not build a school? I said, that sounds like a good idea. And that may be one of the reasons I moved to Texas. Other than the fact that Toronto, they would retire me very quickly. Whereas, there was a retirement age in Toronto. Whereas in Texas, there isn't. And, I'm 80 right now. And there will be conference in my honor in a few places. And I'm a chair professor. My chair is a university chair called Eugene McDermott Chair. And just to tell you, the last two holders of the chair were a physics Nobel laureate named Polycarp Kush, and of course, venerable Frank Bass, who was known for the great Bass model of advertising. And so that's my chair right now. I'm the third occupant of that chair. And so this is a career that led to operations management. This is the story behind my career.
Great. Let me take a pause at this point. What I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the